What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition Power Gamers Tactics Room. I'm your host, Bill Brown Bafflestone. So today we're having another combined episode of my review and rating series and my deep dive series looking at the Cavalier. I did this for my champion videos, and I kind of like this format because with a mechanically simplistic archetype like the Cavalier, there's really not 2 videos worth of content there. So we're just going to look at these, figure out how to optimize them, and rate them at the same time. So this is going to be interesting because I remember way back in 1st edition, when they first rolled out the Cavalier, it was amazeballs. Now, you'll have to forgive me if I don't really remember the details of a class from 40 years ago that I never played, but I do remember my impression of it at the time, which is like, man, Cavaliers are just badass. So it'll be interesting to see what the 5th edition version is like, and if it holds up to that reputation that I remember it having. So before we begin, please like, comment, subscribe, check out the Patreon if you want to support the channel, check out my philosophy channel if you're interested in philosophy, the heroic ethic. Link will be in the description. Let's take a look at the Cavalier. So at 3rd level, Cavaliers get 3 powers: a bonus proficiency, Born to the Saddle, and Unwavering Mark. So the bonus proficiency is role-playing only. It's nice to have, and it's cool for the whole feel of the Cavalier, but it doesn't really add anything in terms of combat abilities. Born to the Saddle, on the other hand, is okay. It grants advantage to save versus falling off your mount. You don't fall prone if you're falling off your mount no more than 10 feet, and mounting and dismounting costs only 5 feet of movement instead of half your move. So it doesn't add much, but we'll take it. I think there's nice synergy here with Mounted Combatant, which I think is a fairly obvious feat that you would want to put on a Cavalier. There's no redundancy in their abilities, although I should point out the no prone option only works for large mounts because huge mounts are 15 feet into the air. Won't work with flying mounts either. And while these aren't hugely impressive abilities, they do point to the role-play importance of mounts to this archetype. And so honestly, as I was looking through these abilities, it just was impressed upon me how much depends on how willing your DM is to provide you with an elite mount. Now, I personally don't find that likely in tiers 1 or 2, but you might want to talk to them about the possibility of getting like a really good mount in tier 3 and above, just because I think it really makes a difference when it comes to this particular archetype. I do want to point out that, oddly to me, Elephant is listed in the player's handbook as a common mount. This one seems obviously better than the other mounts. I mean, it's just like way bigger, got way more hit points, but it does seem weird from a role-playing perspective. So talk to the DM about how feasible this would be. Are there additional costs to feed it throughout the day? Is it going to cause any role-playing issues? And it is huge, so that brings me to another point, which is that a lot depends on how appropriate the campaign is for mounted combat. It's probably not going to be ideal for urban adventures, especially if you're on an elephant, or constant dungeoneering, where sometimes there's tight squeezes and a huge creature just isn't going to be able to progress any further. Or even a large creature, for that matter. Even if you do use a mount, it's probably not the sort of thing that you're going to be able to use all the time. The mount will get killed. So definitely something to keep in mind as we go forward, because we're not going to want to build a character that is dependent on the mount, and we want someone who is going to be able to act without the mount and be effective. So that brings us to the third level Cavalier power, which is Unwavering Mark. And this is the signature ability that makes this archetype. They can mark an enemy as a free action on a hit with a melee attack, and while the mark is active, if the enemy is adjacent to them or 5 feet away, the marked enemy attacks anyone but the Cavalier at disadvantage. There is no limit to the number of marks, but they do last only until the end of the Cavalier's next turn. Additionally, the Cavalier gains a bonus action attack if the marked creature damages anyone but the Cavalier. And there is no range on this part, and it has a limited number of uses equal to your strength modifier times per day, and your attack is at advantage, and it will do half your level in extra damage. Because it's a bonus attack, it's not a reaction, it goes off on your next turn. So a fairly interesting foil mechanically to the Samurai, as this power is entirely defensive, whereas the Samurai was all about offense. The Cavalier creates attacks at disadvantage, where the Samurai created attacks at advantage. Honestly, thinking about builds, I think this makes it difficult to build around if you're keeping the standard DPR progression for a fighter. That progression is pretty feat heavy and main stat heavy, so there's not much room for defensive feats. It straight up doesn't work with archery, so ranged Cavaliers shouldn't be a thing. It's strength-based, whereas archery is dex-based, and Unwavering Mark only works with melee attacks. There is synergy with more attacks for more marks, and a better chance to land at least one, so looking at Polearm Master and 2-weapon fighting here. And I have to say, thinking about how this plays out, it seems to me that the mark description is ambiguous. It doesn't really explain how it works or if there are any visual indicators that go along with it. So we have to ask, does the marked enemy know that they're marked and how this whole mark thing works? Does this imply that they know that they have better attacks versus the Cavalier? Because if they don't, there's no clear reason why they would attack the Cavalier instead. They would just probably continue to attack whoever they're fighting and just be like, dang, I have attacks at disadvantage. But that said, there probably is some kind of visual clue involved because this isn't a magical ability, so presumably there's some kind of activity that the Cavalier is doing that tips people off. And if the DM rules that creatures do understand the mark and will attack the Cavalier, then there's synergy with having good defenses. High AC, getting attacked at disadvantage, etc. Now, Unwavering Mark will protect your mount, since it's always within 5 feet of you, so it will always be attacked at disadvantage by the marked creature, and that's solid. You always want a little protection for your mount, and it does have options when combined with Mounted Combatant, because that ability allows you to redirect attacks from your mount to you, and you might not always want to do that. You yourself might be running low on hit points or whatever, so you might want to let the attack go through to the mount, and in that case, being attacked at disadvantage is pretty sweet. And again, I've never played a Cavalier, but when I think about how I would roll them out in an actual combat round by round and put them in different scenarios and such, it's very questionable to me how much benefit this offers in normal combat with multiple enemies. I mean, just how often will the enemy be attacking an ally while the Cavalier is adjacent to them? There's usually only 2 to 3 frontline marshals in any given party. Most parties are like 5 people, and there's going to be a couple of casters and ranged attackers in there. And so when you've got 2 or 3 guys on the front line attacking things, attacking an enemy that is attacking your ally is essentially focused fire, which is a great tactic, but it does tend to rapidly kill mob component level creatures. So it seems to me like this is best employed versus a BBEG, where you are attacking it with multiple party members, and there's some staying power there where there's a benefit to it attacking you. But honestly, I don't really see how often that you're going to be using this. Please let me know in the comments if you have played a Cavalier, just how often this comes up, because I'm going to be doing a build for this over the next couple of days, and I'd be really interested to hear people's input. Also about the bonus action attack. To me, it's very unimpressive. It seems to me like it clogs or is redundant with other bonus actions like Polearm Master or various class abilities. I think it's terrible that it refreshes on a long rest instead of a short rest like most fighter abilities. It lacks synergy with Sentinel because Sentinel's immediate reaction attack can kill the target of your bonus action mark attack. And there's a lack of synergy with Mounted Combatant, which again, I presume a Cavalier is going to pick up at some point, because that already confers attacks at advantage. And the extra damage is okay, but it's nothing special. So overall, I am not hugely impressed with the Cavalier's 3rd level powers. I give it a rating of average. To me, it is pretty similar to what the Samurai can do. And while I do have it rated average, it's not a strong average like the Samurai. I think the Battlemaster, Echo Knight, Eldritch Knight, Psy Warrior, and Rune Knight are clearly and significantly better than any of the other 5 archetypes, of which the Cavalier and Samurai are probably the best. At 7th level, the Cavalier gets Warding Maneuver. As a reaction, they can add a D8 to the AC of themselves or a visible adjacent creature that is hit by an attack, and the attack does half damage even if it hits. It's limited to a con modifier times per day uses, and I am not super impressed by this. It seems like a pretty poor effect that is inferior to the shield spell since it only affects the one attack, and it consumes your reaction. So similar to Defensive Duelist, but greatly limited in the number of uses per day, whereas Defensive Duelist you can use all day long. Again, terrible that it refreshes on a long rest instead of short rest like most fighter abilities. And it's linked to con, so it creates multi-attribute dependence because Unwavering Mark is linked to strength. So you're going to need to boost your strength and your con. You're going to want to have a decent dex because that's the god stat. And then if you want a multi-class, you're going to need to have a 13 in something else, which is not going to be that easy when you're actually putting a build together. And I see a lot of the same issues with applying this to an ally instead of your mount as with Unwavering Mark. It does seem to me more about protecting your mount than anything else, because the poor range just makes it more appropriate for BBEGs than mobs. So while I'm not super impressed with Warding Maneuver, I give it a rating of average. Similar to the Arcane Archer, not as good as the Eldritch Knight, Psy Warrior, Rune Knight, or Samurai, but better than the Banneret, Battlemaster, Champion, and Echo Knight, because some of these don't really get very good powers at 7th level. At 10th level, the Cavalier gets Hold the Line. They gain an opportunity attack against an enemy that is moving within their reach, and on a hit, reduce them to 0 movement. So there is some redundancy with Sentinel here, which also takes them to 0 movement on a hit. And recalling that Sentinel also has a lack of synergy with Unwavering Mark, I would probably avoid Sentinel on a Cavalier build. That said, it's not completely redundant. You do get some benefits out of Sentinel, so you might want to take it. And who knows, maybe I will at some point in my build tomorrow, but I'm probably thinking not, just because I like things that have total synergy. There is some synergy with reach weapons or extended reach that you get through, say, the Furbolg, but using reach here is going to have a lack of synergy with their other abilities, which require 5-foot range. So you're going to have to manage that. It's a little annoying. There is synergy with Warcaster to Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade with every opportunity attack, because you get this at 10th level, and at level 11, those spells will add plus 2d8 on each hit, and at level 17, plus 3d8 on each hit. So if you're pumping out that extra damage on each opportunity attack, that can be pretty good, especially as we get higher in level. Ultimately, though, it just seems campaign dependent to me on how often enemies will actually move within your reach. Honestly, it doesn't seem to me like this would happen very often, relative to them coming into your reach, like with Polearm Master. I can definitely see it being useful if the DM uses the flanking variant rule, because then they will be moving around in your reach trying to get better position for flanking. But otherwise, it definitely doesn't seem like the sort of thing that's going to be used too often. Again, if you have played a Cavalier and have any comments about this, that would be great. Thanks. Overall, I think Hold the Line is okay. I give it a rating of average. I think it's about the same as what the Samurai gets. I think the Champion, Echo Knight, Eldritch Knight, and Psy Warrior get better 10th level powers, and the Arcane Archer, Banneret, Battlemaster, and Rune Knight get worse 10th level powers. At 15th level, the Cavalier gets Ferocious Charger. Once per turn, if they first move 10 feet in a straight line, they can force a strength save versus prone on a hit. It doesn't require a mount. You can do it without a mount, and knocking an enemy prone is fantastic. It really helps melee allies because it grants them attacks at advantage, and they are attacked at disadvantage. Even better, this is always on and unlimited use. That always gets my attention. But I do have to point out, it lacks synergy with Unwavering Mark, as both confer attacks at disadvantage. Also, knocking an enemy prone for party attacks at advantage will often kill the creature that you've marked, so no bonus action attack the following round or anything. And it lacks some synergy with Mounted Combatant, as both will confer attacks at advantage. But there is good synergy with a free disengage. For example, Crusher or Mobile, you can knock them prone and then disengage and then knock them prone again in the next round, recalling that you do need to move 10 feet for this. And of course, anytime you knock someone prone, there is synergy with a grappling ally who can keep them down. Overall, I find the 15th level power pretty impressive, and I give Ferocious Charger a rating of good. I think it's similar to what the Samurai gets at 15th level. I think only the Psy Warrior and the Rune Knight get better 15th level powers, and I think all the others are worse. At 18th level, the Cavalier gets Vigilant Defender, a special reaction attack that goes off on every creature's turn, including allies, except for yours. Wow, that is a lot of extra attacks. I mean, this makes the Cavalier elite at defending a position as it procs on every enemy's turn. Just amazing synergy with Hold the Line that reduces their speed to 0. And while it can't be used on the same turn as your regular reaction, who cares? There's synergy with reach weapons. There's synergy with abilities that proc every turn or attack, like Sneak Attack, Hex, Hunter's Mark, Elemental Weapon, etc. And like before, synergy with Warcaster, so you can Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade on every one of these massive amount of opportunity attacks. At this level, you're going to be adding 3d8 to each hit, so that is really impressive. I give the Cavalier's 18th level power a rating of Superior. I think only the Psy Warrior gets a similarly good 18th level power, and I think all of the others are worse. So the Cavalier is fairly unimpressive throughout most of its career, and then at 15th level it starts to pick up, and at 18th level it's actually quite impressive. Its powers come in at average, 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 good, and superior, but overall I have to give the Cavalier a rating of average. Most of a fighter archetype's powers are based on its 3rd level power and how it progresses through tier 1, 2, and 3, and so I consider them about the same as the Samurai and better than the Arcane Archer, Banneret, and Champion, but I think there is a big gap between those 5 archetypes, including the Cavalier, and the other 5. Battlemaster, Echo Knight, Eldritch Knight, Psy Warrior, and Rune Knight, to me, are clearly the cream of the fighter crop, and Cavalier just doesn't get there. The powers are fairly unimpressive as far as I'm concerned. So that's it. The Cavalier definitely did not hold up to my expectations from my barely remembered impression of them from 40 years ago in 1st edition. To me, they are a pretty poor class. A lot of it depends on what sort of mount you get, so if you can get an amazing mount and the DM hooks you up, it might be okay, but overall, I really don't think it's that great. I will do a build for it tomorrow, though, and see if I can do anything clever with it, but in the meantime, please let me know in the comments if you have any experience about playing Cavaliers or have anything that you can add to any of the things that I said in this video. So regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition Power Gamers Tactics Room. I'm your host, Bill Braun Bafflestone. See you next time.